First stop, Barnegat Township, where Professor Rich Veit, chair of the Department of History and Anthropology at Monmouth University, is waiting to tell me how the history and geology of our region provided the perfect incubator for the chilling tale. So Rich, I'm curious, why did you bring me here to this location?
Ken, we're here because we wanted to be in the heart of the Pine Barrens.
Oh yeah, I can see it.
So it's a distinctive environment, and this is where the Leeds family, the family so closely associated with the Jersey Devil, would have lived. This is just what it would have looked like.
This is what they would have experienced 250 years ago.
That's right.
Although the day I visit is bright and sunny, I can imagine the feel changes sharply at dusk, with long shadows and unfamiliar sounds, stoking a feeling of foreboding. And a few hundred years ago, the fear of sorcery and witchcraft would have made that trepidation much worse. And this wasn't too long after the Salem witch trials.
No, we're not that far after it.
An active imagination could easily get carried away. Unfamiliar sounds might trigger concern about the dangers lurking in the shadows. And some dangers were quite real. At one time, outlaws would hide in the Pine Barrens, but as is so often the case, imagined dangers were far more terrifying. Now imagine yourself riding along this road on horseback in the 18th century, and then sensing something strange. You might turn to your companion and ask, "Did you hear that? What was that?" This is how your companion might reply, "Let me tell you about the Jersey Devil." Amid the dark bogs and black swamps lurks a mysterious creature. It has the head of a horse, the wings of a bat, and the hooves of a goat, and it menaces travelers in the Pine Barrens. Choking down your fear, you ask where the creature came from. Your companion agrees to tell you the story, but adds, "I hope you're not easily frightened."
So the Jersey Devil, this story begins in the 18th century when a Mrs. Leeds or Mother Leeds is about to give birth to her 13th child.
Trapped in a cabin with only a midwife at her side, this birth was a dangerous proposition. Mother Leeds was terrified, the delivery grueling and not going well. After hours of painful contractions, she grew exhausted and desperate.
She says the devil can take this child. And shortly thereafter, the baby is born, and initially, it appears perfectly normal.
Weak from the treacherous ordeal, Mother Leeds settles into the bed, relieved that all is well. She has cheated death, she thinks. But all is not well. She called on the devil to do her bidding, and the devil must get his due.
But then, before their very eyes, it starts to be transformed. It grows these hooves like a horse. It grows a tail, it grows wings, and then it sort of flaps around this cabin, and you can imagine everybody just transfixed by what they've seen.
A blood-curdling screech follows. The child has morphed into a fiendish ghoul, as if fathered by evil incarnate. And now, looking like a caged animal, it's desperate to escape. Drawn to the flames blazing from the hearth, it ultimately flies into the fire, then up the chimney and out into the blackness of night. Since that fateful evening, the creature, known for centuries as the Leeds Devil, has stalked its prey across the Pine Barrens, seizing travelers who passed through in the night, travelers who never were heard from again. The rest of your journey through the Pine Barrens would have been a nightmarish blend of foreboding and panic. Yet you would tell a version of that same story to your travel companion on your next trip through the region.
And welcome to Music Matters 2020. I'm your host, Jason Tramm. I'm delighted that you can join us for our unique podcast community, where we explore issues in the musical community and the broader arts community, and we look at innovative artists and how they are dealing with the unique challenges faced to us by 2020. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and like us on Facebook and share our videos as you help our community grow. And please also remember that we can chat and join in the conversation with us. We love it when we have our audience ask questions and to join in the conversation. It's much more interesting that way. We have a great guest today. We have Mr. Ken Magos, who is the host and series creator of Drive-By History, which is on streaming on PBS and is also available on, I believe, NJTV and some other places, and he's going to talk about that. But we are delighted he can join us. He has a background in opera and musical theater. He's a renowned voice teacher and a dear friend of mine. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Jason. What a pleasure to be on your show. This is so exciting.
It's great to connect with you.
Yeah.
I've missed you. I know we've been running around like crazy, and you've been building your show for 4 years now. Is that correct?
We're starting season 5 now. We're actually beginning to shoot season 5. But this year has been tough for all of us because this is the closest we can get. But I'm glad that we have this medium. I'm glad we have this opportunity to at least sit and chat. So yeah, we're heading into season 5 of Drive-By History, which kind of amazes me. This was an idea that came about back in 2014. The show debuted in the fall of 2015, and here we are 5 years later, getting ready for that season 5 and a spinoff and a podcast, all sorts of things coming out of it. But yeah, I mean, you had asked me before to talk about my background, and I will tell you honestly, I look at it as many different chapters, many different lives. Sometimes I didn't know what I was getting myself into.
You and I can certainly relate to that. The many chapters and many lives. I could certainly sit down with you on that one.
Well, yeah, and honestly, I never thought at this point in my life I'd be hosting a television show.
Well, life works in mysterious ways, my friend, mysterious ways. And when you're where you should be, things just open up that you'd never even imagined.
I love that. That's absolutely true. Yeah, and that's where opportunity knocks and you can walk through the door. Yeah, but I share that with everybody. It's like, say yes, figure out how to do it, have an experience that you never thought you would. If you stumble, but you learn something in the process. That's my philosophy as a teacher too. Try to sing it. Go for it.
So let's start with how did your beginning in the arts? When did you first start engaged with music and the arts? I know you have a really varied background, so tell us.
I do.
Your background.
I started piano lessons when I was 4 years old. Apparently, when I was about 2 or 3, we went to a department store that had pianos, and there was somebody demonstrating a piano, and my mom couldn't drag me away from the person playing the piano. I was just absolutely fascinated. I was fortunate enough, my parents got me piano lessons. So I started studying when I was about 4, and I studied all the way through high school. I started out playing for choirs at school, accompanying students who were doing like solo and ensemble competitions, that kind of a thing, and never had any inkling that I would want to sing. I was the pianist. I was happy being behind the scenes. And I started trying to sing how these songs went for the people I was accompanying and realized I could do that too. So I thought, why not try and get up in front of the piano instead of hiding behind it? And it turned out that I wasn't terrible at it. When I was in high school, there was, I think it was my senior year in high school. We were living in Texas at the time. There was a production of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum at a professional dinner theater. A friend of mine wanted to go audition. And he said, will you go with me? Please go with me. I'm like, what am I? Okay, fine. He goes, no, you have to audition too. You have to go with me and audition. Not expecting that I would get anything. Of course, I got cast and he didn't. For anyone old enough to know the movie Fame, you know the scene. It's my audition, Leroy. So yeah, he was a little mad at me that I got cast, but he didn't. And I did, several weeks of 6 shows a week getting paid to do it. And I thought, this is kind of fun. Then I went to college. I went to Seattle, the University of Washington, and I went in as a pre-med major, ended up changing my degree to psychology, ended up then working for the Alcoholism and Drug Abuse Institute as a researcher. And so I was doing data analysis and conducting research studies that they were doing. I did that for a couple of years, was doing some community theater, doing Broadway type stuff. And a guy who was the boss of one of the people in the cast, I think that was the connection there, was an opera singer who was singing at the Met. I mean, he had a pretty big career. So he happened to hear me in the show and said to her, he should come study with me, and I think he could do something with this. Like, okay, whatever. So I did. I went and studied with him. Next thing I know, I moved to New York. He's doing his contract at the Met.
There's nothing like the opera bug. Once that opera bug bites, there's no fighting it.
But I mean, of all places to end up, it's not like I ended up in the middle of, North Dakota, a little tiny opera company. I'm at the Met, and I have a backstage pass, and I got to watch Marilyn Horne sing Carmen from the Wings. met Placido Domingo multiple times, met James Morris multiple times, all of these amazing opera singers. And truth be told, Jason, I was young enough and dumb enough. I didn't realize what an amazing experience I was having. Now that I tell you about it, wow. I mean, those were some incredible people. So I ended up going to Manhattan School of Music, got my master's there, and immediately went out and I left school with contracts at 4 different opera companies, which was surprising at the time. Got the Shoshana Foundation Richard F. Gold grant and got a grant from the school and took off. Went to Santa Fe Opera, went to Pittsburgh Opera, went to Italy at one point. I mean, I was working, and the thing, my voice. My voice is not easily discernible what Fock I should be singing. Maybe the older I've gotten, it's gotten easier. But it was, you're a baritone, you're a bass baritone, you're a lyric tenor, you're a Heldon tenor, you're this, you're that. At 28 years old,
everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got an opinion. Every time you sing a master class, you sing a role, the older singers always have an opinion. Like every conductor has an opinion. Every coach has an opinion. Sure.
Everybody. And so it got really confusing. I worked with Franco Corelli, and he immediately was like, "You're a tenor. You're not a baritone." I'm like, okay. What does that mean? What do I do with that? So he worked with me a little bit, and then I went back to New York and really started working and studying and did a few tenor roles. And everyone kept pushing me further and further into the Wagner rep. And I kept thinking, it's not the music I wanted to sing. It wasn't where I wanted to be comfortable. While I was making that transition, I got hired to work at an investment bank. One of the partners broke off from the investment bank and started her own firm. I went with her along with some people from the company, and I was half of the startup team for that. And it was the toughest 2 years of my life, the hardest job I've ever not enjoyed a whole lot. It taught me that the corporate world was not where I wanted to be. Left there, started a consulting firm doing infrastructure development consulting for companies. This was in the late 90s when there was such a huge boom in new companies being built. IPOs were flourishing. I mean, it was just an amazing time in the industry. And then 9/11 happened. And all of the business dried up. Everything. There was no consulting work to be had. I missed singing and I missed being part of the music world. So I went back and started teaching because I thought that connects me to it, but I don't have to go out and do the auditions. I don't have to be part of that side of the world.
And it puts you with your opera / your Broadway background. It gives you a unique base of repertoire, your piano skills. So you get to work on both sides of the aisle. Now you're very successful both opera and Broadway. So I think that's unique. One of the unique aspects about your teaching is you're equally comfortable in both.
I am equally at home with both, and it surprises me how many of my colleagues couldn't sing Broadway, and I wouldn't ask a Broadway person to sing opera, but I was able to float between the two. But yeah, I loved it, and I came back to it, and it was such an exciting time for me to get connected back into the music after being so separated from it. So that was then, early 2000s, and jump ahead a few years, have some ideas for some TV shows. There's a history marker close to the house. And every time I would drive by it, I would see it over on the side of the road, but I could never actually read the sign because of the weird intersection and couldn't get close enough. So one day I finally parked the car across the street, ran over there, read the sign, and realized I can't be the only person who can't read that sign. What if we put a show together where we stop and read the sign and investigate what happens behind it? Ended up in a meeting with PBS. They loved it, got on NJTV, then we added WLAW, then we added Channel 13. And now we're on the cusp of the show going national. So that's where we are with it at this point.
So what's it like? So what's it like to have an idea like that and to watch it come to fruition?
It's amazing. No, it's really amazing, but it seemed like a pipe dream. I will tell you, as I said before too, I'm very much the person who says yes and then figures out how to do it later. So this was also one of those situations. I really didn't know what it took to do that. to put together a TV show, to start it from scratch.
So
and
why don't you
thankfully
tell us?
had a
Because
great
I have
team.
I have no idea. I've never worked in. So how do you your first pilot? How long did it take to put that together? How long are the episodes? So what goes into making a television pilot?
Yes. So the episodes, the finished product is 26 minutes long. It's a 30-minute show, but there are 4 minutes of extra time that is in each episode. It takes us. There are 2 segments in each episode, plus 2 library scenes. Each library scene takes a day. Each segment takes at least a day. So you're looking at a total of 4 to 5 days to put together one 26-minute episode. And those are long days. They're not, half-hour shoots. It's amazing looking at the finished product, and you see, that interview looks like it's only 3 minutes long, but it took us 8 hours to shoot it. Between lighting and getting the cameras set up and getting the questions. Yeah.
How many cameras do you use on an episode? What's a typical camera?
2 to 3 cameras.
2 to 3.
It really depends on how big the crew is for that day. It depends on what the subject matter is too, because sometimes we have one person who's off, shooting beauty shots of the surrounding area. The hills are beautiful, but they can do that while we're shooting the interview. So we kind of, multitask.
Getting that B-roll set and then mixing it together. Yeah, it's gorgeous. I just watched the episode on the Jersey Devil that we opened the show with. That was so interesting.
You like that? Yeah.
Oh, I just love you mix that great legend with the history of New Jersey, and it's a winner of a concept, and you could probably apply that to anywhere in the country. There's so much history around us, especially in the Northeast, which is we got so much. There's just battles that were fought here, and there's famous. It's an infinite source of interesting ideas. I'm one of the people who loves to pull over and read road signs. My kid drives my kids nuts.
Yep. Yeah, but you're informed about what your surroundings are then.
I want to know what happened in these places because
yeah.
Truth is stranger than fiction often is the case. I tell my students.
Well, and even with the Jersey Devil episode, because I'm not from here. I grew up in Seattle. I come here and everybody's talking. I knew there was a hockey team called the Jersey Devils. I had no idea why they were called that. So we start investigating the legend of the Jersey Devil and find out, all about the Leeds family, Mother Leeds and her 13th child, none of which is true. But, that's the legend that comes about from all of this. And then you find out that there are all of these sightings that were happening late 19th, early 20th century, where people were saying they were seeing the Jersey Devil. A zoo put out like a $20,000 reward for anybody who could capture it. Schools were closed because they thought the kids were in danger of being attacked by the Jersey Devil. Then one of the people, these professors that we interviewed at Kane University, were explaining that there's actually a legend that dates back to the original Native Americans who were on this property. They had a legend of this god of the forests who resembles almost exactly what our idea of the Jersey Devil is. So it even predates that 17th, 18th century idea of the Jersey Devil.
I think we it's human nature. We just left Halloween that we want to be scared. That we want to the dark and what's unknown in the dark and this kind of fear of the unknown is just human. And we see it in opera, we see it in the movies, of course, in the film. But that's just humans love that kind of that storytelling, and I think it just resonated. And maybe someone heard that legend and contemporized it, and around the campfire told that story, and that's, I guess, how our legends start.
Well, the legend of Sleepy Hollow, we covered that this last season as well. And that is a New Jersey story, even though we attribute it to Sleepy Hollow, New York. And Ichabod Crane was a real person. He was not at all the way he's depicted by Washington Irving. He was a captain in the army and a very big, brusque guy. He was not at all this, scary little scrawny thing. But it's so funny that where these legends come from. And, the headless horseman supposedly comes from the fact that there was a Hessian who was shot by a cannonball, took his head off, but the horse kept riding. So, his body was on it. So you think about it, of course that would be scary. It's also a way to keep your kids from going out at night.
Sure it is. Yeah, I live not far from Sleepy Hollow, so I live in Rockland County, right over the bridge, and I used to drive there to my first church job. I love that old 1600s town. It's a great town, Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, so now you know that the Headless Horseman story originated somewhere else.
Now, how do you pick your topics? How do you research them? And how does that part of the show work?
So we have a team who does that. We also, from a practical standpoint, there are organizations, there are foundations, both public and private, that will give granting money to shows like ours, and they usually have topics that they want us to cover. So that can be one of the starting points. We have somebody who's on staff who's our academic scholar. She's a professor at Rutgers University, and she also helps us come up with ideas of directions that are timely, things that are interesting. We have one professor who he's a dean at Monmouth University, but he also leads archaeological digs.
Ooh.
And I have to tell you, as a kid, one of my favorite things was digging in the backyard and finding an arrowhead. So I was in heaven when I got to go on a live archaeological dig with him. It was amazing. So we do that. We try to find things that we think will be interesting. We have audience members who write in with ideas, and we often will follow through with those. Sometimes even PBS will come up with ideas of things that they would like us to pursue. So there are many different avenues that those ideas come to us. And then the decision process comes from figuring out, is there enough of a story to put a segment together? Can we build something around this? Is there media that will make it visually interesting? There have to be pictures. I mean, if it's a story from the 17th century, there's obviously not going to be video. There aren't going to be photos. Are there paintings? Is there anything we can grab onto? Because it can't just be a picture of, here's a field where a building once stood. So that's another part of our decision process. So we try to find things that we think will be interesting and visually, and things that I find interesting too, because I like to be interested in the topics when I go.
We have our first question from the audience. This is from
Sure.
Sherry from, she's actually from Houston, Texas. And
Wow.
Sherry asks, what has been your most interesting episode that you've covered so far, and why?
So I have two that I always cite as my favorite episodes. One was going on the archaeological dig, because that was satisfying that kid in me that wanted to go. The second one was going to the New Jersey Natural History Museum down in Trenton. We were going to the first nearly complete dinosaur skeleton found in the US was here in New Jersey. They didn't know how to put it together. They couldn't figure out if it was upright, if it was like a cow, what it was. A farmer had found bones in his field, and he was giving them away. It's like, you come to my house. It's like, well, Jason, here's your present for coming over. Here's some dinosaur bones.
You get a
They didn't know what it
skull.
was. And, they ended up taking the bones to Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia to see if he could figure out what it was. So here's this skeleton that's been found. The guy that we were talking to, one of the curators there at the museum, he said to, at the time, my co-host was Cindy Perman. He said to Cindy and I, do you want to go downstairs in the vaults? I can show you all the real, because the stuff that's on the floor isn't real. So he took us down into the vault, and he wouldn't, the cameras couldn't film.
Say that again. The
going.
stuff that they show on the showroom isn't real?
No,
Oh,
none
good.
of that's real. It's all plaster
Rewind,
cast.
play that again. So it's all the plaster cast they use.
They're all plaster cast because the bones themselves are not generally here in New Jersey. They're not solid. The way when they've been sitting, they're no longer stone. They're spongy. And so they would disintegrate. So they have to be very careful. We weren't allowed to touch anything that he showed us down there. But, like one of the things that he showed us on the floor, he then showed us in the cabinet. He goes, this is what the cast was made from. So, but I got to see real dinosaur bones. Jason, I got to see real dinosaur bones.
That's really cool. Wow.
It was the coolest thing in the world for me. So that was fascinating. I mean, we have lots of subjects that I find fascinating, but that was the one that sticks in my mind.
Well, I'm going to recommend you a topic, but you can say whatever. But have you ever, has anyone recommended yet The Search for DePonte's Grave?
No.
He's
No.
buried. He's buried in New York City. They think in Queens.
And nobody knows?
Lorenzo DePonte is buried,
Yeah.
I think, in Queans. He left after he worked with Mozart. He left. He was kind of a scoundrel, and he had a colored past, and he came to the States. And he worked as an Italian teacher at Columbia University. And then he left to become an entrepreneur, and he opened up a grocery store in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And then he went back to Columbia University. He died in New York.
I had no idea. We all know who Lorenzo Ponte is.
Oh, yeah.
I can't believe
the great
that.
librettist who wrote Mozart's three operas, the Bummership plays. Yeah, it's one of there's so much history here in this area. So how do you turn your show national? What's the next step? How do you choose topics and grow?
Well, okay, so we were approached about doing it for this coming season, and obviously the world is shut down, so it's not a good time. We have to be able to travel.
I've heard that from this is our 62nd episode. We've heard that 62 times.
I bet. Let's hope that this is the last one. I fear it's not, but let's hope. So what we do is, I mean, there is a national database of history markers, which I'm sure that you didn't know, because why would you? You can look up by subject, you can look it up by region. So there are fascinating ways that you can actually find out what's in Wyoming, what's in Seattle, what's in California. Yeah. I mean, we have a plethora of history markers here just because as old as this country is, this is the oldest part. And it's been, you've had such a huge population here for so long. The further west you get fewer. I mean, the town I grew up in outside of Seattle was incorporated in 1954, and I don't think the log cabin's even still there. Probably existed. So this is definitely the area that's so rich in the history. So that's the next step for us. Then we choose the subjects, we would fly out and shoot those episodes, and then it would be distributed by PBS on one of their national platforms.
How do people watch these? How can people watch your work?
PBS.org streams the episodes. Right now, I think season 4, which is the most recent that aired in May, June, I think those are the ones that are available. I think season 3 will come up soon. 1 and 2 are not available right now. And then season 5 will be coming up in hopefully fall of 2021. We're on a delay again, pandemic. We can't shoot as often as we'd like to. So we're on a bit of a delay, but we're hoping that probably 9 to 10 months from now, season 5 will be available. You can watch it on NJTV. You can watch it. I know your light just changed. You have some mood lighting going on there.
Yeah, I lost it. There we go.
There you go. Yeah. Oh, that's good. You can just point and the light comes on. You're powerful. It's the conductor in you. You point and things happen.
Luckily, you're on full screen right now, so no one can see.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. So no one's seeing what's happening with you. So we will. The show will be available then on channel 13, 21, 23 here in this region, but also anyone throughout the entire country can watch these episodes on pbs.org.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And how many episodes are in a season?
Right now, 6. When the show goes national, that will bump up to 12.
Ooh, it's exciting.
It is. It's a lot of work.
Well, it sounds like a lot of work. And how long in advance do you do the pre-production? How do you choose how long does it take to choose the season, to choose all of the different episodes?
We're kind of on a yearly schedule. So we start. Typically, this year's different. Typically, we start in the winter, as in after January, February, that time of year, because we're not shooting at that time. It's outside, and I don't want to freeze myself out there. We start the ideas start flowing, and then the season kind of comes together over the next 6 months. So that's the pre-production and some filming, some production, and then the post-production begins, and we finish off with pickup shots and whatever episodes we might need from there. So that usually goes into the fall, and then the show airs. Wow. And we have to deliver them about 6 to 8 weeks ahead of time for PBS to review them, and so it's all on a timetable.
Very exciting work, and it's just great to see someone that I've worked with you before as an artist, and to see what tell us what it's like to what do you bring from your artistic training to this that makes it work better for you?
I will tell you the one thing. It's fun. You'll appreciate this. When we're on shoots, because we have to shoot things multiple times, because sometimes the camera work isn't right. Sometimes I screw up a question, sometimes whatever. Every guest that I interview always says to me, you have the same enthusiasm each time you ask the question. Like, that's how it works. When you go on stage, I have to look like I'm doing it for the first time. So I don't even think about that. We don't think about that. You show up to conduct an opera, you have to act like it's the first time that this audience has seen it. When I ask, so that's one of the major things. The other is, as you can tell, I have no problem talking. So
I've had a few guests. It was some guests I've had who are not as extroverted as you and I. It was a little bit like I'd ask a question, and these are brilliant people, but I would ask a question and they'd give me like a one-word response and then silence. That makes it so much harder.
Yeah, I've had that same experience on the show. Fortunately, it gets edited so you can't see it. But yeah, when you're like, so tell me about this. It's nice.
And then you're like,
No,
okay,
that's not good enough.
reform, reattack.
Yeah, exactly. So it does help. Being a performer, I'm comfortable getting up and doing presentations. We reach out into the community. I'll go out and, especially as the season is getting ready to debut, I'll go out and do presentations before, 20 people, 150 people, whatever it is. And obviously, from standing in front of 3,000 people and singing, talking in front of 150 people doesn't really faze me.
It's funny, like, yeah, it's funny. Whenever I conduct, I face away from the audience. So even when I'm in front of very large audiences, I don't like actually see that. I pretend that, not that I pretend they're not there, but I just have become the music and I just kind of tune everything out. It's just kind of a tuning out thing, and I just engage with what I'm doing. And then I turn around, oh yeah, there's people here at the end. It's always so surprising.
But that's wonderful because you can then really escape into the music, into that moment that you're having, and it's great.
Yeah, it's that's a different. When I learning how to do this podcast thing, I was really nervous at first, getting to staring at the camera and just imagining and just being. But it's been a fun transition to get to do something different.
You're a natural, Jason. You're doing great. You're doing great.
It's a lot of fun to share people's stories. And when COVID hit, I was supposed to be doing 3 huge debuts in Europe, and it was a great summer. I worked that 2 years in advance. I worked those contracts out. When everything landed and everything stopped, I was depressed, of course, like we all were, and I was doing yard work and things I haven't done in years. And finally I said, you know what? Got to find something to do. So I'm like, what can I do? And I have a millennial son who's like, let's do a podcast. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, what can we do? But it's like, why don't we just talk to artists, people who are doing artistic and innovating in this time of COVID? And it's kind of developed into how we react as an industry to this incredible challenge we face. Our creative people create. That's just what we do.
And we have to find an outlet. As you mentioned earlier, it's like I've been teaching voice for many, many years. My studio is gone. Thank God I have a TV show. I mean, don't cry for me, but I love working with those students. And first, all of my students, my professional students, their contracts were canceled, so they have no money. Their Broadway contracts. I have one student who made his Broadway debut on Tuesday. Wednesday was when Broadway closed. So he literally got 2 shows in. He didn't even get the Wednesday night show. He got the Wednesday matinee.
Oof.
But you know what? He's made his Broadway debut. It happened.
It will come back someday.
It will. But so that's where my studio was. I was very fortunate to be working with singers at a high level, but singers at a high level lost their contracts. So here we are. So I don't know when that's going to come back. Like you, I had to get creative. March and April, I was depressed and trying to figure out, okay, I can't teach voice. I can't do this. We can't really shoot the show because everything's shut down. And I thought, and this is the news that I posted earlier on the Drive By History Facebook page, but it's like we are expanding and we are doing a spin-off show called Drive By History Eats. And
sounds delicious.
We're taking we shot the pilot already, and believe me, everything was delicious. So we're taking past episodes. The pilot, for instance, was George Washington and his senior officers visited Theodosia Prevost, who later became Theodosia Burr, at the Hermitage in Hohokus here in New Jersey for 4 days. Now, imagine today if the president of the United States, if the most important person in the country came and stayed with you for 4 days, Jason. You've got to come up with a meal, and you can't run to, the ShopRite and go get food. It's July, so you have some limitations. The animals that you maybe are raising on your farm are not ready. Your vegetables are maybe not ready. So we had to get really creative. We have a fantastic food and culture historian, Libby O'Connell. She used to be the head historian at the History Channel. She's joined us for this project. She is coming up with recipes that would mimic what would have been available at the time. And we have a chef who then reinterprets them for a modern audience.
I love this. The confluence of the arts and history. What magic. Yep. That's incredible.
It's great, yeah. And on top of that, like you, I'm doing a podcast as well. So that will start probably next month.
Is your podcast on your top on Drive By History?
The podcast, initially my concept for the podcast is this is an opportunity for the audience who's really passionate about Drive By History to get to know our guest historians. I'm going to be talking to historians who come on the show for specific topics and let them talk about their work. talk about things that are important to them or things that are coming up for them or books they're writing. Because I think it's important to give them an opportunity to voice, what's going on in their lives as well.
I love sitting down with historians. As a musician, I pick the brain of every musicologist I know. I'm just like sponge. I'm like, what? Because they always have such fascinating takes on things, and those takes influence sometimes what I'm thinking about when I'm preparing repertoire. It gives you unless you know what a composer is going through emotionally in their life, you have no idea what this piece of music really should be and why it's the way it is. That's what makes it special, I think. And music to me is like an amber where it captures everything that was going on in society and crystallizes. And once you dig into that amber, you can really mine some gold there artistically.
I absolutely agree. I will tell you also, my music background has served me a number of times. Most recently, we did an episode on there are impressionist paintings that have been turned into not live sculptures, but full-size sculptures, life-size sculptures. And understanding what was going on in Europe in the mid to late 1800s and how it relates to what was going on with music. And the professor that I was interviewing understands music as much as she does art. Ooh. And so the two of us are having this conversation about the beginning of Vidismo opera and talking about, when we go from it being kings and queens to being real people, and talking about how impressionists were painting real people and how shocking that was. Anyway, it was
from
just
the Baroque King Louis the Sun King, King Louis XIV. Every piece is praising the king, the monarch. There was their own PR machine at the time, and then the French Revolution had no longer that made sense, right? That's
right.
Mozart,
and before that, it was the church. It was. It really. Yeah, but you look at the history, and the same thing with the art world. It's incredible. Really of one piece. But yeah, it was fascinating.
I always love to bring up the composers that knew each other. The composers, the artists, how they're friends. They live in the same society. So it's interesting to hear when they're together and how they interact and how they inspire each other's works.
Absolutely. And you can hear it because they also borrow from each other.
That gives me another really good historical tidbit. I'm sure you've seen this. Have you seen Puccini's music box that he owned that has the melody that was used in Madama Butterfly that's in the museum in New Jersey?
Yes.
That's a cool story.
Tell the story. Tell the story.
Well, I know it was given to Thomas Edison. Mm-hmm. And Thomas Edison had it, and he donated to the Morristown Museum. And I've heard it. I'm like, that's like da da dun 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 ba. That's the end of Madama Butterfly. It's used throughout the show. It's how cool is that?
I know.
No one believes me. I'm like, no, it's sitting there in Morristown.
No, it really is. It really is. No, but it's fascinating. But there's so much around us. The more you understand, the more you can appreciate all of these little gems that are accessible to us.
Oh, I have a question from the audience. This is
yes.
Ken from Staten Island asks, who chooses the music for your show?
It's funny. It's kind of a group project. Our executive producer does most of it, but I think we actually bought the rights. We licensed a theme, and we had initially licensed music for only broadcast, and now that everything's on the web as well, it's a whole different licensing thing. So we just had to go back through season 3 and redo all of the music. That's why season 3 is not currently available, but it's coming. And that's why seasons 1 and 2 will not be available because no one's going to go back and sit and do those for
Gotcha.
It's a long process. So
now,
that's how that comes about.
What have you learned by doing all this work? And, from season 1 to go into season 5, what are some lessons that you can take away that you're going to bring with you as you move forward?
I honestly, it's less what I've learned. I've learned a lot about television production. That is absolutely true. But the same preparation that we bring into our musical lives, I bring into this show. I do my research. I do my homework. I have to know the answers to the questions. I can't just know the questions. And sometimes guests will stumble and I'll be like, oh, well, here's the answer, just so you know, and now we can shoot it again. It's coming prepared. Just like being on stage, you have to know the other person's lines, or else the two of you are just going to stand there going, not my line. I don't know. You go ahead. No, you go.
Like a middle school dance.
The conductor's sitting in the pit going, somebody sing.
I've been there before.
Yeah, well, we all have.
I can tell when a singer turns sheet white and is just looking at me, I'm like, I can mouth it ahead of a phrase. I can give it just.
Yes.
I've never worked in a theater with a prompter. I've never worked there before. I'm always the prompter / conductor / everything. So.
But it's funny because even in musical theater, I still connect with always with the conductor, because it's like that's my safety net, and I know. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. But if I'm doing a big piece, it's like I want to know. It's like we have to be eye to eye. I can pretend I'm looking at the audience, but I'm looking at you. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it's heartbreaking at Broadway these days. I've got some Broadway artists coming on the show. I've got the principal Blue Man from Blue Man Group, who I went to high school with. He's coming on in January, and he's been there since 2005. He's been on that show. And these guys are like, but they're all doing interesting things now. We're all saying, okay, now what? We're all professional artists, and we have this burning desire to communicate. People just realize it's not just an avocation. It's actually like what keeps us alive and keeps us positive. And
it keeps us healthy.
Yeah.
That's the truth. And without it, there's a part of our souls that dies a little bit. So we have to keep. You're doing this. I have my thing. I encourage everybody out there who's listening to this or watching this, find something you're passionate about. Read about a topic you're passionate about. Go to a museum if you can. Go learn something. Watch something. I got a subscription to this masterclass series that's on. It's the most amazing thing, because you can watch masterclasses from people who are at the top of their fields, and they're willing to share their time. I mean, obviously they were paid for it, but they're willing to share their secrets, and it's fascinating. And I'm learning.
There's always so much to learn. That's one thing I find is every time I do something new, I'm just fascinated by the podcast, or by this television show that you're doing. I always learn from my colleagues. It's just fascinating to see what brilliant work people are doing and how they're adapting to change.
Mm-hmm.
Are you finding more time to script out shows, to plan episodes? Is that a lot of what you're doing these days, is getting ready?
I mean, a lot of my time is also taken up with, we have to get funding for the show. PBS, this is something that people may not know, but PBS does not pay for programming. So we have to get sponsorships. That's why you see, like the Ralph Lauren ads on Downton Abbey, and you'll see the Viking river cruises and all that kind of stuff, because they have to go out and secure funding to be able to pay for the production costs. So that's part of my job right now too, which in this climate has been a bit of a challenge. I will tell you one really funny story. So one of our clients, I won't say who it is, but one of our sponsors rather, because of COVID, they had to leave their offices in New York City.
Oh.
No one took the checks. No one took the actual checks. So we had to wait until COVID had reached a level where they could go back into the office building to get the checks to actually. Whoever thought 2020 would bring us this insanity?
Yeah, there's just everything you do is a little bit harder, is a little more complicated.
Yeah.
From teaching at university, I teach 3 ensembles. They're all remote.
How are you doing that, though? I mean, it's got to be a
this summer, my summer job at Ocean Grove, I did 2 weekly Zoom rehearsals with 60 to 80 people on each rehearsal. I learned kind of the limitations, what can be done, what's possible. I gave them a lot of things to practice on their own. I was doing weekly virtual choir projects, so I prepare guide tracks. I upload them to YouTube so everyone can access them and practice on their own. And the most important thing is keeping the communities together and keeping people practicing, keeping people engaging with music in any way possible. So I've been doing that with my ensembles, and a lot of lectures, a lot of bringing history to life in these pieces, not just music, because we can't make ensemble music. We can't hear each other. They can hear me.
Right.
They're practicing. I can't hear them. I only hear them when they send in their recordings. Then I rubric them and send them back to give them some feedback. But it's a totally different paradigm. But I'm in contact with all my colleagues, and we're just trying our best to keep music alive for people and to keep it, It's just a challenge all the way around. It's like, I guess I saw the same from my publishing colleagues. They're saying this is a great time to be a composer. It's a terrible time to be a publisher because no one's buying music because there's no demand, because there's no choirs or orchestras so it's a great time to work on your skill set. Great time to try something, to learn a new language, like you said, learn, absorb a new skill set. Just find a way to engage and learn and expand, because this is a time to do that.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I'd never used Skype before. I had never used Zoom before.
Really?
No. I will be honest with you, though. One of the challenges for me, because I tried to teach voice by Zoom, I I need to be able to hear the live instrument.
It's totally different. Yeah.
It's putting a choir together, you're trying to look for blend, whatever, and all the things that you look for. But for me, it's like with an individual, I need to be able to hear what you're really producing, not what's being produced through the microphone, through the computer, through the delay, it's maddening. But look, we have gained skills that we didn't know we needed. And look at us now, Jason.
Look at us now. Okay. We have a question from T. Mason from Seattle asks, so when are you going to do an episode in Seattle?
Todd. It's got to be my buddy Todd. I went to college with Todd.
Cool.
Todd, when are we coming to Seattle? Hopefully once we are able to travel.
The history of grunge.
The history of, oh God. Yeah. Seattle does have other history. I promise. So Todd, soon, I hope.
Grunge was huge when I was in high school, so I was first thing hit, but I love Seattle. It's a great town.
Yeah, it is a great city. It's a wonderful city. It's changed so much. I was there in January, ironically, for about 4 days, and I couldn't find my way around. It has changed so much.
Wow.
So much, yeah. But anyway, yeah. So there you go, Todd. Soon.
So Ken, one more time, how can we find out more about your work? Where can we catch your podcast, your show, learn more about you as a performer? Where can we get all the Ken Magos information in one place?
So one of the things for Drive By History, you can follow us on Facebook at Drive By History 2. I don't know who Drive By History 1 is, but we're Drive By History 2. And drivebyhistory.tv is our website. You can find out information about past episodes, future things that are coming up. Drive By History Eats will go live soon. I'll have information on the Drive By History Facebook page and our webpage about that. And then the podcast itself will be available on YouTube, and we'll have links from our webpage to that. You can watch past episodes on njtvonline.org. You can watch them on pbs.org, WLIW. You have multiple ways that you can do that, and those should be accessible to anybody anywhere in the country.
We're going to put links to those on our social media so everyone can find it and check out your work, because you're doing such great work and such interesting work. And save me dessert.
I will. Trust me, it's delicious. It's
We're going to end our episode with we're going to play your Sweeney Todd performance. So you tell us about that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
One of the hardest musical theater roles for sure.
You reach an age where you're like, well, okay, I might as well say yes to some of these roles that I haven't played. It's probably the hardest non-operatic role that I've ever taken on. And I would actually argue that it's fairly operatic. The way it's written, the way that it's structured. There are scenes where you just go, from duet to solo to duet to, it's a lot of singing. It's a lot of big singing. I had the time of my life. I also had a cheat sheet in my pocket the whole time, trying to remember which scene was next. But yeah, it was amazing. And what a fantastic cast. We performed at SOPAC. It was so much fun. I had friends come in from out of town to see it. I'm so grateful that they made the effort to come see it. But wow, what a fun experience.
Well,
just wonderful.
I look forward to playing it. And have you been vocalizing a lot during the COVID period?
What? I'll go with that's a hard no. I should be, but I'm not. Yeah, please don't ask me to sing anything right now.
Well, find that time, because you are such a dynamic artist and you have so much to offer. And I look forward to getting you in front of your students again when things start to open up. And
yes,
we all.
I want us to work together too, because for those of you who don't know, Jason is a phenomenal conductor. He is such a joy to work with. And I say that from personal experience. We worked together on one show years ago. I have been waiting for us to be able to do it again.
What year was that? Jeez, that was like it was quite a long time ago.
I don't think we want to admit how
my twins just turned 18 last weekend. They were like babies, so that was like 18
babies.
years ago.
It really was.
Oof.
I can tell you it was 17 years ago, because I do remember. I know. Feels like yesterday.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck on all of your new projects and Drive By History. And we look forward to checking it all out. And I encourage everyone to go watch these. And I think you really enjoy it and learn something new.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for Music Matters, and please subscribe to us on YouTube and like our videos and share them with your friends and family, and help our community grow. We are YouTube's fastest growing YouTube musical podcast, where we explore the lives of artists and interesting people in the arts and look at innovations during the time of 2020 COVID-19. So thank you so much. We have a wonderful pops and classical conductor this coming Sunday. We have J. Ernest Green. J. Ernest Green has conducted the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Milwaukee Symphony, all over Europe, and he was the music director for many famous people. I think you'll enjoy him very much. Ernie J. Ernest Green on Sunday at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Remember, keep music alive. Good night.
There's a hole in the world like a great white pit, and the vermin of the world inhabit it, and its walls once worth what a pig could spit, and it goes by the name of London. At the top of the hole sit the privileged few, making mock of the vermin in the lower zoo.